Just thought I'd show you some of this footage of this little wallaby that we have in our district. This is a little buck. He's probably about 3.5, 4 foot tall. Fairly stocky little fella. Just thought I'd show you just outside my shed. Hello and welcome back to AC's Make and Repair. Glad to have you along. If this is your first time visiting my channel, my name's Arthur and I live in North Queensland, Australia. Well, I've been away for about, haven't done a video for probably 4 weeks now. Haven't been away for that long, but I've been away for quite a bit. My wife was having more treatment and I've been going to be with her for some of that, and my daughters have gone for some other times too. However, we're home now and she's had some cancer treatment there and she's doing fine, which is excellent. We're very grateful for that. And we're home now. And since I've been home, I've had to catch up on some of my paid work, since I've been back. So I've caught up on a bit of that. I did start another video the other day on another project I wanted to show you guys out there, but it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I made a mistake. However, I've understood what mistake I made and I should be able to do that in the future. One that you guys will probably be interested in, and I'll explain more of that when I do that in the future. But today, however, I wanted to put a video up, and I've been meaning for some time to show an adjustable little scratch stock, and this is here. This is actually a beading scratch stock. The blade in it I made with two 5/32 double beads at the top, so it's a double bead, 5/32 beads they are, and a single bead one at the bottom, so you can end for end that blade, that scratch stock, that scratch on, I suppose you'd call it, and you can fit it. Also, the fence is adjustable and you can move the actual blade itself too. So you can actually adjust the fence, as you can see. You can actually adjust it more than that if you move the blade further out. And you'll see how that's done when I make it. So look, come along with me. We'll get into it. I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so here we go. The material I'm using is an old mower blade. Some of those people who've watched my videos before have seen me use mower blades to make carving knives, etc. It's excellent for what this is. It's got enough spring in it, and I find it really more than adequate to do this job. So I marked a centre line in this mower blade, and as you can see I'm cutting down that centre line. The blade is only about 1.6 millimeters thick, so it's got enough spring in it, definitely got enough hardness in it. I keep it cool by wetting it down. It doesn't actually get that hot doing this, believe it or not. It gets warm, but it very well preserves it when you preserves the hardness when you do put the water on. So I cut it down the centre and I divide it into two pieces, and I just use one part of this for the time being. I will definitely keep the other part to make another scratch stock blade, I'm sure of that. So after cutting the blade and just giving a quick lanish on either side with the lanishing belt, I square the ends. I do cut them off the grinder too, obviously keeping it cool. Now here you see me just marking with some engineer's chalk a line roughly centre. It's very close to centre, and this I'll use just to mark out where to put my beading grooves as such, or concaves as such. So as I'm doing the single bead first, I use a hacksaw here, as you can see, just to have a starting point. It's quite hard to start with the hacksaw. It's quite hard material, but I use a chainsaw file, as you'll see in a minute. It's a 5/32 chainsaw file, and I use it to file the concave or the semicircle in it for the profile that I want. Chainsaw files come in various sizes and are excellent for this type of work and do an excellent job. Much better than what a rat's tail file would do, or a round file that wasn't a chainsaw file would do. Now for filing the double bead. Before I go on, in hindsight, I probably could have made the single bead a little bit shallower. I filed these down. As you can see, I start off equally on either side of that centre mark, and I balance it out centre over the centre line, as you'll see. Look, it doesn't matter if you go to one edge, you can adjust it to suit with your fence or where you position your blade on your scratch stock. Like I was saying, I went a bit deep with a single one, and I did actually go a little bit deep with these beads too, the concaves of these beads. In the end, I actually file these ones back. You will see in a minute I file these back so they're shallower, the tops and the sides. I should have done that with a single, which I will do too, because I found when I scratched it and used it, the doubles came up far smoother and better. And horses for courses though, you might want a far more distinct bead, so you might want to go deeper. Now I'm just making a beading blade here. I could make various other profile blades if I wanted to use in this particular scratch stock. Most scratch stocks you can put different blades in. Stanley number 66, they had several blades that they used in that cast iron version of a scratch stock. Here I'm just marking the depth of the bevels on the sides. I mark it out and then I just chalk a line in, as you'll see now, to the edge of the bead. This just facilitates a little groove either side to convex in beside the bead itself. You could make this however you like it. The profile is entirely up to you guys. Today I'm just doing a beading one. It's one that I want to use a lot, so that's why I'm doing a beading one. And now I'm doing the same on the double bead end. This is the end. If you can look carefully, there's a little bit of a round over on the edge of that cutter. That's one of the reasons I had to file the tops down and do it again, besides it being too deep. Because if I'd left it rounded over, it wouldn't have scratched properly. You really need nice square shoulders and sharp corners to use these scratch gauge. You can't really have rounded over edges at all. So after marking those bevels, I went over to the bench grinder. I ground them roughly back to the marks that I'd put in. I will trim these up with a file. I find a file far more accurate, which is what I'm going to do now. I just file it right close up against the line. Make sure it's nice and well balanced, so when you use the gauge, scratch stock, it works well. I find you get far more accuracy by hand filing and shaping than when you do if you try to use a bench grinder or such with these little profiles. I do use a bench grinder at times, but for this sort of fiddly stuff and small stuff, it's far easier to use a file. So this is where I filed the tops off the double bead. I actually took the blade, gave it a test run without the stock to hold it, and I found it was too deep and the corners were too rounded on the edge of this. When I lanished it a little bit, I must have rounded it a bit, so I needed to file it back to get rid of that rounded corner. And now I'll go through, dress the top like in with the flat file now, and then I'll go through with that chainsaw file again and just concave out those beads again till they're acceptable and they're nice and sharp shoulders on the edges. When you see me placing my finger behind it, that's just so I can see the profile a little bit easier. Now we're on to making the stock part of the scratch stock. I'm making it out of a bit of old second-hand silky oak. I just dress it down a little bit with the plane, and then we go on and I rip one part off the bottom of it, which will be the fence that I make. So as you can see, I've ripped the bottom part of that piece of timber off with the saw bench, and that will act as the fence on the bottom. I dress that again and square both edges up. Here I'm actually cutting the slot on the bandsaw to hold the blade that I ground before and made the beading grooves in. So this slot has to be cut. I cut one groove with the bandsaw, which you actually didn't see me doing, and now I'm actually widening that groove to just snugly hold that blade. And it's at this end where my index finger is, it comes nice and square, and I'll put that blade up against that shoulder. That will actually pinch the blade. I'll put a bolt through that. There we go. It's actually going through it. And I'll put a bolt in the other side of it, as you'll see. That will pinch and clamp that blade in position. So now I'm going on to drilling the bolt hole and the end of the slot for the movable fence. So the bolt that goes through the main part of the stock and the end of the slot that I will be cutting into the part of the fence that moves and slides in and out, as you'll see. Now it's time for test assembly. As you can see on the fence, I've cut a slot there. I used a bandsaw to cut parallel with the hole I drilled. I'm going to put a dowel in there to hold it nice and square and parallel with the main stock body. It's not a tight fit, it's a little bit sloppy, but you don't want it too tight. It doesn't need to be too tight. Just stops it from swiveling around. Now we're going to use a little cup head bolt, or some people call them a coach bolt. And then we'll put a wing nut on that as well. Now this will squeeze that and clamp that blade in there, as you can see. Just seeing how that goes. Nice and firm. And we fit the fence. Make sure it all fits together nice and neat. Yeah. Sliding quite good. You can move that along to the blade. hence your fence moves further. Now it's time for disassembly, and I'll give it a light sand and I'll put some linseed oil on it just to coat it. As you can see, this didn't work out too bad. This is silky oak. It's not the best to do scratch stock work in, probably, because there is soft and hard parts of the grain. So now I'll go and show the single bead. I'm turning the blade over and for ending it, the single one there. And like I said, I could have made this single bead a little bit shallower, like the double. It's up to you totally. Took a little bit to cut the bead, and it's more pronounced as a bead. I probably would make it shallow, and I may make it shallow in the future. So I'm just lining up centre here. This is a test sample. Alright, I just thought I'd explain the adjustment of the fence a bit more. But before I do, you can adjust the blade. So you can slide the blade in and out. In fact, you could put the blade right here at the outer edge if you wanted to, like that. Okay, so if you had some sort of top, say for instance this top here, and you wanted to scratch right in that far, you could. And you could go right in that far if you wanted to. And like I said, even on curved surfaces, What I would suggest though, if you're going to do a curved surface, is make it a little bit different fence up that has 2 single points at either end. Depending on the circumference, you might need those points closer together. Depends on the circumference of the item you're scratching to make the profile in. So you can move that fence right into there pretty well. You can move the blade closer. The blade comes up. I cut that with the bandsaw, as you can see. It comes up nice and square against the shoulder. Now, it's common sort of knowledge that with the scratch stock, if you hold it on a bit of an angle, it seems to cut better, and seems to not chatter as much as such. You can slide it right down to your finished profile. However, you probably won't get, if you see what I mean, right down to that height there sort of thing. You won't probably get the clearance for any waste material. It might build up around the cutter. So, like I said, you can this one I made it so you could end for end it and put it in and then tighten it up. So that's up against the fence there. On this particular scratch stock, I've put it out about 1/2 inch in order to facilitate how to use it and get the angle that I need. I would say about a 60 degree angle when you're using it. And the good part about this is you can actually turn it around and go the other way if the grain changes. So in them cases where, I'll give an example here on this board here, in them cases where a grain might go like that, and the cases where, I'll just see if I can zoom in on that a bit better. No, it doesn't want to zoom in. Okay, in the cases where a grain might want to go like that and the grain direction changes as you go over that swirl in the grain, sort of, that's the grain, you might want to come from this way, that way, or come from this way, that way, and meet in the middle, because it is actually still easy to go with the grain. You can use them both directions, which is a blessing and a benefit. So I just thought I'd show that to you and show you how it adjusts. I don't know if you noticed, there's a little bit of dowel that I put in there just to hold that from wobbling around excessively. It is still fairly loose, but it keeps it pretty well in line and stops it from twisting totally as you use that. Alright, there you go. Rightio, thanks for joining me on this video. I hope you enjoyed the little video on how to make that scratch stock. It's not like a standard one. A lot of blokes just make it so it's a fixed blade in one position, where you can, some blokes make it where you can move the blade itself, but I've made it so you can move the fence. I think the number, Stanley number 66, you could move the fence on, which was beneficial, because if you're going against the grain one direction and you wanted to swing around and go the other way, it was quite good. So that is a beneficial point about a moving fence. Alright, thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.